All right, sorry, technical difficulties right off the bat. Let's start this over. We are diving into a Devi mock, and we're gonna put Aaron to the test as soon as we get back.
Welcome in to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to all things Devy and C to C. Hosted by John Arrington and Aaron Wilcox. This dynamic duo brings you actionable strategies with player-driven analysis for your Devy and C to C leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive in. Welcome to the Devi Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devi. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox. That's at Aaron Wilcox86 on Twitter. And sorry about that beginning. It told me that I was leaving the studio, but I never clicked on leave studio. So I was trying to figure out exactly what was going on there. But we are here. I did not leave, thank God. And we are here tonight to diagnose a Devi mock that Aaron has recently done. Getting back into those Devi streets, getting back into the Devi goodness. But you know what? We had so much fun with that game last week that I decided let's go ahead and run it all back. We don't have Andy with us, unfortunately, tonight. He is having way too much fun in Italy, but we are going to do a game anyway. I'm going to put Aaron to the test, see if he can figure out which player I am trying to see here. But first, obviously, we have to check in with Aaron, see how he's doing. How are you doing tonight, buddy?
Doing well, and my Minnesota Timberwolves are in the playoffs for well in the NBA. If there's any basketball listeners out there, so know that I'll be cheering them on after we're done with the podcast here. And but yeah, no, excited to get back to some football talk. I was part of this mock draft that we are going to review. So and there's a couple people in the Devi and C2C space. So college fantasy football podcast hosts, etc., that were all part of this mock. So kind of a nice blend of folks who are knowledgeable, and I think there is yeah, mostly contributors there. So it's kind of an interesting exercise to see what they are thinking in drafts as well.
Absolutely, I think it'll be great. A lot of good info there, and a lot of questions that arise from that info. Jeff DiMatteo is in the chat as usual. He says two-man crew today. Yes, unfortunately, like I said, we actually have some big news coming up. I'm not going to go ahead and spoil it yet, but the Devi Devotional does have some very big news coming up very soon that we will be making public as soon as possible. And you know what? Andy decided that he didn't care. Like as soon as he heard the news, he was like, I'm going overseas. I'm celebrating. I'm making a big deal about it." So yeah, we're hoping he will return very soon, and so that we can, so that we can all partake in the big news together. Like I said, we will let you know what that news is as soon as possible. Speaking of news, we don't have any news or notes or anything like that today. Nothing really going on too crazy. Most of your spring practices and games are over. Most everything is just kind of happening. Transfer portal's over. Nothing too crazy going on. So, like I said, we're just gonna go and dive right in. We're gonna put Aaron to the test here. Are you ready, Aaron?
I am ready.
Alrighty, so this is the way we're gonna do it. I'm just gonna give you a clue. You're gonna try and guess the player. If you guess, great. In the future, we're probably gonna put a point system to this, and maybe even make like a long term game and everything. But for today, we're gonna be kind of just trying it out, having some fun with it. If you don't get it right, we'll move on to the next clue, and obviously every clue will get a little easier until you finally figure it out. Hopefully, you can. If you can't get it with my last clue, then I don't know. We might have to shut down the whole pod. But no pressure, though.
Let's
All
give it a
right.
go. Hopefully, we don't have to shut it down after just trying this once.
All right, here we go. First clue. All right, this one's gonna be, it's pretty vague. So not gonna give it away right away. But if you get it, I mean, it is possible. He is a wide receiver.
Oh, jeez. So I'm supposed to guess each time, or do you want me just to go right off the bat and
I
ask
mean,
for a clue here?
You can skip if you want, but I mean, obviously, like there is that random chance that you could guess the right name after the first time, but you can absolutely
Oh,
skip if you want.
Jordan Tyson.
It is not Jordan Tyson. I'm lucky because I wanted to do Jordan Tyson, but I figured it would have been a little too easy. So, all right, this one's getting more specific. In fact, it's very specific, but it's not necessarily something that is specific enough that I think you're gonna get it. So we'll see here. He had a 19% receiving market share in 2024, but he was not the leader in market share on his team.
TJ Moore, Clemson wide receiver.
Good guess. Not correct, though. Not correct. 19% receiving market share in 24, but was not the leader in receiving market share on his team. He jumped up. This one's getting a little more specific here, but still not too easy. He jumped up from 114 receiving yards in 2023 to 874 receiving yards in 2024.
What was the 2023 total? 100 something?
114. So pretty big jump from 23 to 24.
Makai Lemon?
Okay, good guess. I like where you're going there. Not the right player. This one's gonna help out a lot, I think. He plays in the SEC.
Caden Lee, Ole Miss wide receiver.
Yes, Caden Lee.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Very
Um,
good.
nice.
Uh, that was pretty good. I still had three clues. So like I said, this will be something where we have to, uh, we'll have to figure out how we're going to do a point system and all that kind of stuff. But I'd like to do more of that as we move along. The rest of the hints that I had were his team passed for 4,561 yards in 24, and the leading receiver went on to the NFL. And then the what is that? The sixth clue was Ole Miss, and then the seventh clue is it rhymes with maiden knee. You did not need those last couple ones. So very good job, very good job. Caden Lee was your what was your clue? Now we got to talk about him for a second. How are you feeling about Caden Lee going into this year? Because I feel like he's kind of a polarizing figure in Devy. You have some people that think he could become the next Trey Harris. You have other people that are like, he's just pushed up by that system, and he's not actually a good wide receiver, and yada yada yada.
Yeah, well, I have been part of two C2C leagues, or I should say supplementals, that have been going on this off season. And Caden Lee, he has been drafted actually quite high in both of them. I think within the first, 3, 4 rounds of the supplementals. So people are definitely catching on to him. As far as the Devy landscape goes, I don't know that many folks are that committed to him as a Devy prospect, as a true force in the Devy landscape. But I mean, it's kind of a shallow class. It's not the most sure class, that's for sure, this upcoming year. So the 2026 wide receivers being somewhat thin, I think that Caden Lee could certainly make a name for himself in this class, but not maybe as a top 3 or 4 type of guy in the class, but coming in after that. So think about in rookie drafts, maybe in that second round range, similar to how a Jalen Noel or Jaden Higgins or Kyle Williams now has risen up. But again, a lot of Williams has been like draft capital, right? But I think at the end of the day, there's going to be more than just that with Caden Lee. There's some attractive aspects to his profile. He's going to be stepping up presumably for Ole Miss this year, potentially the number one target. I mean, we'll see. He's not a very dominant threat in the red zone. He's not a great touchdown threat. I think there's some limitations with his game. He's not very physical at this point, and his frame is kind of lacking. So I do think that there's plenty of weaknesses there too. But like I said, Caden Lee could certainly become a relevant wide receiver in this upcoming class.
I tend to agree. I like it. All right, so that was a fun one. We will do more of that moving forward, but why don't we go ahead and dive into this Debbie mock draft that you did? I guess it's the fourth mock that C2C has done. It's usually what Dynasty PJ that runs those. Is that right?
Yeah, he puts those on typically.
Okay, and that is it. Just at Dynasty PJ on Twitter. I don't want to put out the wrong name.
I believe so. And yeah, yep, I believe that's the handle.
Okay. If not, we'll find it. We'll put it in the show link. We'll put the right name out there. We want to make sure the right people are getting credit for everything. We're not going to sit here and go player by player or throw out every single player that's being drafted here. But obviously, we want to just kind of go over. Probably our favorite and least favorite picks of the rounds, and is there anything that's egregious anywhere, like that kind of thing. Obviously, well, I guess I won't say obviously, but I think it's becoming pretty much the norm, the consensus here. Jeremiah Smith starts us out at 101. Definitely appears to be consensus at that point. Anything stopping you from taking Jeremiah Smith 101, or you on board with that as well?
Yeah, good pick there. And you actually won't find me disagreeing with many of the picks here in the first, to be honest. Just as a little spoiler, this was, I wouldn't say like a chalk type of start, but at the same time, weren't too many huge upsets, in my opinion.
I tend to agree with you, but I do wonder. So we get two 2028 QBs here. The top two for most people, Bryce Underwood and Keelan Russell. And how are you feeling? This is a Devy. This is not C2C. This is not a CFF draft. It's just strictly Devy. If you're in a Devy startup draft, are you drafting 2028 QBs, wide receivers, whoever? I mean, really, at that point, I guess it technically doesn't matter. But I mean, are you drafting 2028 players over beyond that? We know once we get past that, there's a lot of those 2027 wide receivers that we've already seen hit. There's a lot of players that we've already seen hit, like a Jordan Tyson or somebody like that. There's QBs that have already hit, or at least have shown us flashes of hitting already, like Lenore Sellers. Jeremiah Love, one of your favorite players, we'll get into in a little bit. Are you okay taking those 28 QBs over more proven players?
I typically am not, though. I mean, to speak for 12 people in a league, there typically are a few people will jump at those high-end five-star quarterbacks, and that's what Bryce Underwood is. Very safe as far as the tools, the upside that he possesses. Should be starting from day one. So I think that there being some uncertainty in the Devy landscape just in general about the upcoming class and years to follow. That once you kind of get that drop off after like Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, Arch Manning, I'm not gonna maybe I won't be the one to be investing in incoming freshmen, but I'm not necessarily um, hating those picks necessarily. I guess even if I'm not the one doing them, there are a couple other guys I would prefer over them. There's just a lot of risk. We've talked about this in the past. Anytime there's incoming freshmen, we know that a certain percentage of them, a higher percentage than we'd like to admit, are going to bust. So at the end of the day, yeah, maybe we'll go 1 for 2. Like Keelan Russell might bust, but Bryce Underwood might be a stud or at least a pretty good prospect. At the end of the day, maybe it's due to the landscape. And I'm not saying that this particular order that this first round draft went in is perfect, but those guys will be pretty typical in Devy first round drafts and startups for sure.
Yeah, I think those are going to be the names that I'm going to let somebody else draft, and I'm going to take. If I'm not really planning on doing any Devi startups anytime soon, but if I do, those will be the names that I just let somebody else take. And I've just seen way too many of these QBs. Obviously, I've done the research, and it's funny. I heard our good friends from the Back to Debbie pod. They were talking about it. I think it was last week on their podcast, and they went with the cliche at this point of you can never get a QB cheaper than in your startup or your supplemental or whatever it is. And I just don't agree with that cliche. I think that it's like maybe I don't know if like there was more hits in the past or whatever. My research only goes far so back or so far back, I should say. But there's not that many hits at quarterback, and I've seen so many players, even like in Arch Manning. We've seen Drake May go for cheaper than what he was probably originally drafted at. We've seen obviously Jaden Daniels go for much cheaper than what he was originally drafted at. JJ McCarthy, like all these players that have hit, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., like players that have even moved on to the NFL and have hit, they're all cheaper. There's like one player that you can really say in the past probably 5 years that truly was from day one to the day he hit the NFL a top pick, and that was Caleb Williams. Beyond that, there were so many QBs. Look at Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart was a 5 star or high 4 star QB recruit, was highly sought after going to USC. People were like all about Jackson Dart. Completely flamed out at USC, has to transfer over to Ole Miss. Even then, it was, is he going to make the team? Is he going to be the starting QB? This and this and that. And then look at now we have a first round talent that a lot of people are excited about, myself included. But you're telling me you couldn't get Jackson Dart cheaper than when you drafted him in the startup or in your supplemental drafts. So this isn't me bashing on Corey and Mike. We love those guys. I just think we got to get that kind of stuff out of our heads. I think there's so many more instances of us seeing QBs falling out of or people falling out of love with the QBs and you being able to get them cheaper than the Caleb Williams or or that one that one particular guy that you're thinking of when you think of that kind of thing. There's probably 5 to 10 other ones that don't.
Yes, and those guys, they might maintain the value or have some of that value grow in that year one period, but after that, I mean, it can fall really quickly. And we've seen that for many recent prospects, 5 star guys included, just looking at 2 classes ago. So it can get scary real fast with the quarterbacks. Just because it can be true doesn't mean it's always true, right? So I think that cliche certainly can be true, like, getting Arch Manning or guys like that. Maybe that is true that that was the cheapest that those guys ever went for, but there's plenty of other examples of, yeah, you know what, these guys are tanking in value, and you're losing a lot of value just by holding on to them, drafting them super high as true freshmen. So yeah, that's very valid in this case in the first round of a Devy mock startup.
Yeah, and they went fifth and sixth overall, Bryce Underwood and Keelan Russell, respectively. So they were drafted very early in this draft. Like I said, we have some more proven players: Nick Singleton, T.J. Moore, Cam Coleman, Bryant Wesco, Jordan Tyson. Go after that. I'm guessing you have no qualms with any of those picks there, or do you think? I mean, you basically already said that you were pretty happy with the first round.
Yeah, it's very fair there, and it's got to pick your flavor too. It's like this is a super flex format, so obviously quarterbacks that much more valuable if you can actually pick the one that's going to pan out because we know that the hit rates can be pretty low there. So the wide receivers, all very fair ones for that range. Some unproven aspects to their profile, that's for sure, with T.J. Moore, Cam Coleman, Bryant Wesco, but I mean, we know that there's a lot of upside there. Should be some pretty fun upcoming offenses there.
Absolutely. Getting into the second round is where we probably see my first questionable pick, I would say, like truly questionable. And it's going back to the QB position. You're probably going to hear that a lot from me tonight is I'm going to pick on the QB drafters. But Sam Levitt goes at 202. We talked about Levitt last week, and I said how I love Levitt as a player, a CFF player. He's going to produce on that side. I got him for essentially free in my C2C league, so I love that. I drafted him towards the end of a startup, like in the 40th round or something like that. And now I have people sending me first round picks and things are trying to get him off of me. And I'm like, nah, guys, I think I'm good. But this is strictly Devy. He's not scoring you any points. He's not doing anything. And we talked about his downside. The big time throw rate's not there. The intended air yards are okay. The interception rate is okay. It's just nothing like truly screaming like, oh my God, this guy is ready to take that next step and all that kind of stuff. So, do you think that Levitt is a little bit of a reach here, or are you okay with it just because you're trying to get that QB? Obviously, he is coming up. He should be coming out in the 2026 class. We're assuming. Is this? Are you okay with it? Just trying to get ahead of the game?
Well, ultimately, I'm okay with Sam Levitt only because I'm looking at the QB landscape and I'm like, he makes sense as a potential next guy up. Now, there's some other guys I'd throw into that bucket that you could acquire later, but that's in hindsight, right? Um, we, I would actually rather detract from like Dylan Raiola, Deuce Knight as two quarterbacks that were drafted at the end of the second. I dislike those picks more, if that makes sense. I think that there's a some hope for Sam Levitt to be a pretty legit prospect this next year. I don't know that we see that from Dylan Raiola in 2 years, or in with Deuce Knight. I mean, that's a huge boomer bust type of pick. I mean, it could really pay off, but the bust probabilities for him are just super, super high. So I'm pretty hesitant to want to do that this early in the draft with those quarterbacks. Sam Levitt, like you said, maybe a little bit more safe at this point, but yeah, the upside maybe a little questionable. He's not a finished product at this point. So, like you said, we're talking a lot about quarterbacks issues with drafting them pretty high in Devy drafts, but that is the Devy landscape at the end of the day.
Yeah, and like you said, there's not as many proven players this year. We are kind of going, we're all kind of grasping at straws and things like that. This time around, it's definitely not. Although I will say we did. I think it was either a Devy mock or we just went over like the Devy landscape at the beginning of the off season, and I remember just thinking how like dire everything was. And then the more I've dug into it, the more I've found players that I didn't have the right ages, or I didn't have this or that or whatever. Like now I'm feeling a lot better about the landscape than I was, where I really was sitting there going, "Holy crap! Like this is pretty bad." um, and
Yeah, we
speaking of
mentioned
pretty
that
bad,
last time. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but when we mentioned that last podcast, even with the quarterback class, once you start diving in, you're like, there are some guys like if they
yeah.
stepped up, they already have some promise. They could certainly rise big time. So that's true throughout the whole Devy landscape right now. But it does seem like a little extra um, average class, I guess, compared to what we've been used to.
Yeah, there's just not that proven player. I mean, I was even thinking back, just a couple of years ago, we had Caleb Williams and Drake May, and obviously we ended up getting Jaden Daniels and JJ McCarthy and so on and so forth. But just having Caleb Williams and Drake May at the top and knowing that they were going to be there just made everything feel so great, about everything else. It was like it doesn't matter. We know we have two solid QBs no matter what, and then obviously whoever steps up from there is just gravy. Right now we're sitting here going, like we need everyone to take a step forward, so it doesn't feel as good. We got our good friend Hollywood Titan in the chat. He says, "Welcome to the Jaws show." That's right, baby. Hollywood is number 36. If you know, you know. Appreciate you, Hollywood. Let's jump back into this draft, though. I mentioned some players that I didn't like here. Getting into the second round, is there anyone that stands out, whether you love or hate the pick?
Yeah. Well, I'll say that I drafted at 201 Jeremiah Love here. I don't think that's like some sort of huge steal or anything like that, but I do think he's the RB2 right now in the landscape. And I think he's set up for a good season after a really great breakout season. So I think there's just enough to his game where he's a really good all around back, receiving ability, improving tenacity as an inside runner, definitely the explosiveness as an athlete. Got a lot of things going for him. So I'm not going to necessarily talk about that pick because I don't think it was a steal by any means. Going down through that round, I mean, Caden Durham, Nate Frazier, those are solid backs in the middle of the second. Um, I I don't know if I have like a favorite pick from there. I guess I hate to be negative all the time, but like Justice Haynes, maybe a little bit risky there. Ryan Wingo, now that we know that, can't remember if this was before the Emmett Mosley transfer into Texas and Jack Endries, the tight end coming in from Cal. But I mean, that Texas room is pretty crowded. I don't know that we see one guy truly dominate there. So I wouldn't be comfortable quite drafting a Ryan Wingo that early myself. As a guy who kind of likes Wingo, It's still a little bit rich for me. So those are a couple, I guess, additional thoughts from this round in the middle second, at least.
Yeah, I think the two in the second that stand out to me are the Justice Haynes and the Deuce Knight picks. Picking on the QB drafter one more time, and then Justice Haynes, man, he has been a letdown for sure compared to what people expected from him. And obviously we love going to Michigan. We expect big things from him at Michigan. We're hoping that offense will turn around and be substantially better than it was this past season. But man, can we even guarantee that Justice Haynes is 100% the workhorse running back and all that? I don't know that we definitely can, just because he hasn't been that at Alabama. He's never really proven to be that. He definitely hasn't proven to have much of the receiving game, and so we're asking a lot in year three for him to take a pretty substantial step forward. And I just think there's some players, especially some wide receivers, that I would probably rather take here than possibly getting a running back in his third year taking a big step forward. Other than that, I'm pretty much okay with all. I'm not the biggest Antonio Williams fan, but like he's kind of grown on me over time. But it just seems like someone's always going to draft him ahead of me. So I don't hate the pick by any means, but I think there's some wide receivers that I would take ahead of him, or I know for a fact there's some wide receivers that I would take ahead of him. And so It's just one of those players that I'm probably never going to end up with any, because somebody's always going to want to take him before I do. But let's go ahead and dive into the third round here. Speaking of one of those wide receivers that I love and that I would take ahead of Antonio Williams, we start us out here at 302, Eric Singleton. Love the player. I know, obviously, going over to Auburn, things are a little more competitive. It's not exactly what we've come to expect with Singleton just kind of being the guy and everything. But I think he has the talent to where he can still take over and earn his space in that offense, even if it's not necessarily a 40% market share or whatever it might be. I think he can still do his bigger playability and scoring a lot of points in that Auburn offense. So I'm pretty happy with that pick there at 302. How are you feeling about that one?
Yeah, I also like Eric Singleton. I think he'll translate well. He'll test well when it comes to just preparing for the NFL draft. So a lot of positives there. Unfortunately, it's a crowded wide receiver room. So, like you said, he's not going to be a super dominant producer. It could hurt his opportunity for solid draft capital and being maybe that analytical stud, but very solid pick in that range. I liked 301 as well. I mean, Darius Taylor, running back there at Minnesota, just a very solid all around player with set up for hopefully another solid season. I think the injury concerns are always a little bit overblown with him. I know there are folks out there who always talk about he's always banged up, but they're little things. They're not anything that I would expect to be recurrent or necessarily holding him back for the NFL. We just know that the running back position, unfortunately, you just get nicked up there, and it's kind of the nature of it. And he's a high volume player, so I still like his potential ultimately as a NFL asset. He's a good pass catcher. So Darius Taylor, running back out of Minnesota, I think he profiles well there in that third round versus like you see later in that round, like Mekhi Hughes for Oregon. We'll probably talk about him too much this offseason. We'll try not to maybe harp on it too much. We just think that he's going a little bit too high in most drafts. So I think John would agree with me there. And then I guess another guy like Eugene Wilson, I just don't know that we've seen it at Florida. He just seems a little bit
Yeah.
gadgety, A dot, not necessarily somebody who wins downfield, doesn't run a that diverse of a route tree. He's dealt with injuries, and now there's all these talented guys coming in at Florida who could potentially take away a lot of targets and partially his role there. I have a lot of concerns with Eugene Wilson at Florida. I think he could still have a solid enough season, but as a Devy prospect in the third, I'm kind of out.
Yeah, you're talking about a low A dot player who has barely been on the field, hasn't really proven anything. Yeah, I made a bet against that, almost that same exact player last year in Zachariah Branch, and I'm willing to do the same thing this year. I can't really say Branch had any injury concerns, but it was just the low A dot player that hadn't proven himself. and I bet against him, and I'm feeling pretty good about that this year. I'm kind of expecting the same thing from Eugene Wilson, and I guess I should say I'm not expecting much from Eugene Wilson, but you know, it's not going to be a Debbie devotional this year. Every year I pick one player that I harp on that I hate. This year it's got to be Garrett Nussmeier. It just has to be. At 303, Garrett Nussmeier being drafted there. I absolutely hate it, and I'm sorry to the person that drafted him. I'm not trying to be mean. I don't hate you. I hate the pick. Um, it's just a player that we voiced our concerns about Nussmeier last week. I think we've said a lot of what needs to be said, and it's just a player that I don't expect to take that next step forward in his fifth season. There's some players that you can make a lot of excuses about and say, well, this is why, that's why, and I don't really see it with Nussmeier. Just to reiterate a little bit, like his weapons have actually gotten worse this year. So I don't see how he's going to take a giant step forward and just become the guy that he never was in any year prior. And he's a gunslinger in like the worst possible way, and it's just not what I want for my NFL QBs.
Yeah, that's fair. And I guess other guys in this range, not super inspiring. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. Like I do like the Jace Brown pick, but again, that's I hate to talk too much about my picks. They're at the end of the third. I tend to like him for NFL purposes more than I like a Denzel Boston, more than I like Eugene Wilson, and then even like the Evan Stewarts of the world. Like I get it, but you're just kind of relying on the guy that he was coming out of high school versus the guy that he's been thus far in college. And I mean, Jace Brown's been a stud thus far in college. I know we've always liked him on this podcast, probably more than consensus. He's kind of like Eric Singleton, who went earlier in this round as well. These guys that are under the radar maybe don't get quite enough appreciation across the board. Some people out there are fans, I know, but yeah, I guess I'll talk about Jace Brown there at the very end of the third round. And he won't go that early, by the way, in most drafts. Like he's probably going to fall a little bit later in some drafts, and you could probably scoop him up there at a nice value. Don't know that you have to draft him in the third by any means.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's not that you have to draft him there, but I mean, I would have taken Jace Brown over any of the wide receivers in that round, except for Eric Singleton. So I do not hate it by any means, and I definitely agree with it. But like you said, it's one of those things where it's like, well, I don't technically have to take him here, but I don't want to miss out on him either. That kind of thing. So you got to decide when that actually works for you. We start getting into a lot of 2027 and 28 players here, which obviously makes sense. Like we said, it's not a proven Devy landscape, so you're going to see a lot of people pivoting to the freshman recruits and the unproven sophomores and things like that. We've been a little negative here, so why don't we try to be a little more positive? All right, so we've kind of crapped on all the QB picks, but now that we're in the fourth round, we get Drew Alar and Cade Klubnik, two players that we said, while they're not proven 100% proven yet, they're not where they need to be today. That doesn't mean that they can't get there. They have the tools to possibly get there. How do you like that pick in the fourth round? Because I feel like this is when I'm actually like, okay, I'm actually getting on board with taking some QBs in the fourth round there.
Yeah, I tend to like. I think all of these QBs in the fourth round there. I mean, you saw Longstreet, the freshman coming into USC, maybe the next Lincoln Riley quarterback. There's some positive buzz out of spring camp already about him. Tavian St. Clair, he's probably the one that I like the least out of this group, but still, I mean, stab at the Ohio State quarterback who has a lot of talent. I think there's probably more talent there for him than Julian Sayin. And Julian Sayin, if you went back and listened to last week's podcast, he's what, top 5 in the nation for like Heisman odds. So it's like, that's always pretty good exposure there if you could get that Ohio State quarterback. And then, anyways, you mentioned Drew Alar later in the fourth and Cade Klubnik, both guys who should have some really interesting seasons and very productive seasons. And I find both of them to be attractive Devy prospects, especially in the fourth round. So, yeah, I did like those picks at the quarterback position. And I mean, there's some other picks I definitely liked in this
A
round.
lot of
So, I
20,
mean, yeah.
a lot of 2028 wide receivers in this round. You starting off with Jerome Miles, then Latsier Brooks, Talon Taylor, and Dallas Wilson. What's funny is I think I remember us talking about Talon Taylor in uh, one of our first pods where we actually like broke out and started talking about the freshmen, and I was like, man, Talon Taylor is not really getting any love. And you said, oh, it's Georgia and it's this and it's that and blah blah blah. But he's picking up a lot of steam recently, and obviously Latsier Brooks is probably one of the biggest risers of the entire offseason as far as. As far as freshman recruits go, because he was almost like a no-name recruit, and started picking up steam in spring practices, spring game, all that. Next thing you know, here he is being drafted in the fourth round of these rookie or of these of a Devy draft with a lot of like fairly big names.
Yeah, that's fair. And Lotzer, I mean, he's the guy who's moved up for me as well. But I still kind of question the size a little bit. I mean, he's like 5'9", very thin frame, like in the 160s, maybe 170 now, I guess. But definitely a riser, right? He's been showing out, and I think he'll be a nice playmaker for them. Will he be a Devy prospect? No, I mean, I think that you still want to roll the dice there at a good system, school, etc. And Taylor, like you said, I mean, he's been involved in the spring, so that was another reason to try to draft him early in drafts. I've always liked the talent there. He's a talented route runner, talented freshman, if he can get on the field at Georgia, which is kind of a deep, but he could break into that rotation for sure. And then a couple other freshmen. I mean, Dallas Wilson. He has really risen up for me. I made sure to draft him pretty high in a supplemental here this offseason, and I was just a big fan of where he uh, broke out in the spring. He looked really good. His film looked very promising as well. I mean, he's still a little bit raw, but a lot of these freshman wide receiver guys coming in, they are still raw. So I think that Jerome Miles, who went before them, it's a good upside play for at Texas A&M. But Jerome Miles, coming off of some injuries there, that's a little bit more risky in that profile. And then Emmett Mosley went the pick before. I probably have to amend my statement a little bit from very early offseason where I was like, you know what, I'm not really into the Emmett Mosley hype. I, I'm not fully in on him by any means, but Emmett Mosley, when you take the context of what that offense was, and it was just sad. The passing attack, it really hurt Alec Amonor's production, obviously, his explosiveness, all of that. And it definitely zapped Emmett Mosley, who is used in many circumstances kind of behind the line of scrimmage because that passing attack, they just were kind of incompetent with the quarterback play and the play calling. So I don't hold all of it against Mosley, but I mean, I also expected him to do a little bit more sometimes with the ball in his hands or win with some more technical components down the field. So there's still some question marks, but he is going from an offense there at Stanford out to Texas. And we know that Arch Manning is set up for likely a very successful, prolific season. Who is going to be the wide receiver one there? There's not really a proven face there. I think that Emmett Mosley could slide in just as easily as you could see like Ryan Wingo. I'm not a big DeAndre Moore guy as far as like being a stud within the offense. He could be a starter, but they need a guy who's a little bit more reliable. Emmett Mosley there in the early fourth. I'm getting more okay with that pick. I think there's something there. I don't know if he's a stud, but he could be a pretty solid player for Texas.
Yeah, I do have Wingo ahead of Mosley, but it's not that far ahead. In there, obviously we have the context of it was a really bad offense. He's going to a much better situation. The team, Texas, said, "Hey, come in. Like we want you here." When they already had some established ish players, so it's tough to say, oh, well, he's just garbage. He's not going to be anything because, I mean, like I said, they brought him in. He did fairly well, or at least he had some big games in a bad offense with a very good player in Elikai Manor ahead of him. And then when you're talking about Ryan Wingo going a full 2 rounds ahead of him, or I guess it was a round and a half. We won't say 2 rounds, so a round and a half ahead of him. I'm okay with this price. I really am. So I'm kind of with you, like where I was kind of out in the beginning when he was still at Sanford and all that kind of stuff, and people were falling in love with them, and it seemed like he was even getting more steam than he is now. Or maybe it was just I won't even put words in your mouth. Maybe I was just hating on him, and so I was kind of out. And then now I'm like, all right, well, maybe I can get him at the right price. I'm okay with him here in the fourth round. Um, I don't really like. I won't say I really hate any of the picks, and I do like the Dallas Wilson as a Florida fan, as a person living in Florida. I can tell you, I've heard and seen a lot of hype for Dallas Wilson, um, and even Vernell Brown, the third, the fifth, whatever he is. He's one of those. He comes from a long line of Vernell Browns, but he's gotten some hype as well. But Dallas Wilson definitely seems to be getting a major amount of hype. Diving into the fifth round here, though, this is where we get some running backs. We finally had a running back run, pun intended. I don't know that I love the running backs in this round, though.
Well, for Devy purposes, it's really a mixed bag. And at this point, I mean, you start throwing darts out there, guys who could continue to rise up, like Bryson Washington. I actually really like this pick in the fifth. That was a Corey pick, and of course, Corey took him because that's one of Corey's guys. But he's also one of my guys. I just took him in the early first. It's kind of a depleted supplemental C2C draft. But, anyways, I took Bryson Washington pretty early because I just really like not only the production that he's going to bring this season, building off what he did last year in Baylor, but I think that there's a little bit of an underrated receiving component to his game and certainly some further projection this season. He has the size, frame. I think he has enough athleticism to really project as potentially like a dark horse riser in this class to like the RB3 position after like a Nick Singleton, Jeremiah Love. So a lot there to like potentially with Bryson Washington. We'll see if it comes to fruition. But yeah, like Jam Miller, we kind of, I don't know, we just keep drafting Jam Miller year after year after year, and he's just not getting better, if anything worse, right? Bo Jackson, incoming freshman at Ohio State, like I can't hate it. I mean, he could be the lead guy there as a true freshman. We just don't know, right? There's not news out there saying that he will be. At the end of the round, James Peoples, same thing. Could be the leader at Ohio State. We don't know. He wasn't amazing as a true freshman, but it's a small sample. Isaac Brown, that's like a CFF guy, right? We're not really thinking that Isaac Brown, as good of a season as he had, he could be a pretty electric college producer. Is the Devy upside there? It's questionable, but in today's NFL, I guess I won't discount him completely, right? We have Devin Achane, we have some other guys who are making a mark in the NFL at like a sub 200 ish frame, but I mean, we'll see. And then Jordan Lyle, the guy that I took there at 5'12, I actually kind of like him to break out this season at Miami, but I get why to this point his profile is still a little bit incomplete, but I like his breakout potential.
Yeah, honestly, I think I was focused on the Jam Miller. I really don't. I don't hate Bryson Washington. And then you have some freshman recruits. I would have liked to have seen Gideon Davidson, who ends up going in the sixth round. Would have liked to have seen him up there in the fifth round, probably rather than a Jam Miller. But I think I was focused on the Jam Miller pick and just going, man. Like you said, it's just guys at this point, it's just not happening. I think we just have to figure out that it's not going to happen for Jam. He's just another one of those guys. He kind of reminds me, obviously not the same school. Oh man, I cannot remember his name now, but you were a pretty big fan. It seems like just about everyone was a pretty big fan of this player at Georgia, and I cannot remember his name now. Another running back that just people had huge high hopes for, and just never came to fruition. But we'll move on. I'll probably think of it a little bit later. Yeah, so that was it for the running backs. Obviously, there's some QBs here. We have Dante Moore, who is, what did we say, third in Heisman the odds? Was that what it was from last week or whatever he was? It was top
I think
five
top
at least.
five, yeah.
Top five at least. Aiden Childs, who's just kind of like that underrated QB that just never seems to get any kind of love, but also never really puts it all together either. So
I was gonna say underrated. I don't know about that. I feel like he's overrated from what like I just have him quite low in the grand scheme of things. So I'm like, I just don't know if I'm throwing my dart there. But the rest of the quarterbacks, the rest of the way through, aren't that inspiring either, right? So
No.
if you were like super QB hungry, I get it, but at the same time, like just don't be that way, right? There's plenty of other positions you can pivot to in Devy. Don't be drafting for need. These guys are not scoring points on your roster. They're sitting on like a Devy taxi squad, that type of a situation.
So I haven't given you too much love here yet, mostly intentionally, not trying to pump your head up too much, but I'm loving your 601 Jeremy Bernard pick. I really do feel like he's one of the underrated wide receivers in Devy right now, just because he had an underwhelming QB throwing him the ball last year in Jalen Milroe. We know that Milroe is not the greatest in the intermediate parts of the field and all that. He's a big play QB. And guess what? You have Ryan Williams on your squad. That's not going to leave a lot of big plays for a player like Jeremy Bernard. I, it was tough falling in love with Bernard coming over from Washington, being like the fourth receiver on that offense, and it's just like how can you fall in love with that player? And yet a lot of people were really hyped when he went over to Alabama, but now a year later, people are just kind of like, well, he's off my radar. I want nothing to do with them. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here going like, once again, this is an unproven wide receiver realm in Devy, and this is actually a proven player that has actually done some nice things, albeit in some bad situations. So I like the pick here at 601. I mean, were you looking at a few players there, or was it like dead set? Like, no, I'm taking Jeremy Bernard.
I basically was like him or Gideon Davidson there. Those were kind of my two guys, and I was like, maybe I could get Davidson the next round. Probably not because I was drafting on the turn there, back to back picks. So I knew I was maybe giving up my chance, but this was not an actual draft. I was willing to yeah, take a share of Jeremy Bernard there. It's funny for folks who have been listening to the Devi devotional for years. What a roller coaster of emotions with the Jeremy Bernard. When I was like, yeah, you gotta like pay attention to this guy going to Alabama. And you're like, no, he's trash. And then now it's like I'm kind of pumping the brakes. I'm like, I don't know about this guy necessarily. We're like almost reversing roles in some way, but obviously we both kind of like him to a degree at this point. And so he's one of those guys where it's like almost a post hype sleeper, if you can call him that at this point,
Yeah.
if that's fair. So
I think it is a funny story. Went to the Senior Bowl and stayed in a house with a few guys, and Dirty Mike from C to C was one of the guys that stayed with us. And so, of course, we're all sitting there talking about Devy and rookies and everything else, and so I'm going through Beth and I'm showing Mike, my ranks. He's showing me his ranks and all that, and he's going through my, oh, you like him? You like him? Like if you've heard Back to Devi, you know that Mike loves Hudson Clement, and he's like, oh, you have Hudson Clement there? Like he was so excited about it. But then he gets to Jeremy Bernard and he goes up and he closes my laptop and goes, that's disgusting, I can't look at it anymore.
that is
So yeah,
great.
it's a very polarizing player there at this point.
Love it.
But yeah, so I think that there's quite a few picks that I liked there. One in particular, I guess I'm going to go ahead and toot my horn here. Last year, I said, should we be giving this athlete, this five-star athlete, a little more love in our supplemental drafts and things? Should we throw him at the end of a supplemental draft? And I believe you told me no, you should not. And yet here we are, Terry Bussey in year two is being drafted in the sixth round by Dirty Mike, I should say, and it was just a player. It seemed like there weren't that many players ahead of him. He was a 5-star prospect. Yes, he was more of a defensive prospect or recruit, but they had said that he was going to play some offense and things like that. And it was just like, maybe we should throw this guy. And I can't even toot my own horn too much because I didn't do it anywhere. So, like I'm all talk, I guess. But it was one of those things where it just made sense that he could become a thing. And here we are. Like I think we've seen enough from year one to say, hey, why don't we draft him here in the 6th round?
Yeah, yeah, that was one that definitely came to fruition. Um, that's the risk that you have to take sometimes with incoming freshmen. They could be nothing. Like Aaron Butler was in the same boat. Aaron Butler, kind of a promising guy who flashed in high school, and like you thought, okay, if he actually plays a wide receiver position, he's going to be great. Well, he really didn't end up getting on the field as a true freshman. So it's a matter of like what position are they going to play? Because Aaron Butler was like, is he a corner? Is he wide receiver? That type of a thing. That was even more so of a risk. He wasn't gonna. Terry Bussey at Texas A&M was not even gonna play wide receiver, and they're like, yeah, this guy, we need a playmaker, get the ball into his hands. The issue is Terry Bussey's comp is Luther Burden, and that could be really good, or John's making a gross face. In that case, maybe John won't be too
I'm
into him.
out.
But I
I'm
mean, that's
out. I
what
want
Terry.
nothing to do with them.
That's what Terry Bussey's profile looks like to this point, though. I mean, very low ADOT type of guy, run after the catch, very raw. His route running's not good, but you can certainly get him involved in the rushing game. You can certainly get him involved underneath. He doesn't. So the difference is that, I mean, we're looking at Luther Burden, who was a 5-star type of wide receiver with at least some route running ability from high school, and we just have never seen it out of Terry Bussey. Like he's never really actually ran the wide receiver position going back to high school. So he's literally even further behind than a guy like a Luther Burden, who still is not that developed. So it's like those guys who don't have that technical component coming out, I'm just not that into it. Like why am I buying into Terry Bussey? Um, Truly figuring it out. And they're also bringing in different competition there at Texas A&M. So again, I don't hate that pick. That's probably enough or way too much time on a Terry Bussey. I think that's a fair range for him, but like I'm not necessarily excited running to the podium to make that pick in the 6th.
Yeah, you said Luther Burden was a route runner. I'm gonna have to show you that video again because I think you might be mistaken. Um, enough about Bussy and enough about Burden. I'm hoping that we don't have to talk about Luther Burden ever again very soon. But a player I'm hoping we will talk about again is Cedric Baxter. I have him in every single Devy and C2C league that I am in. And that has not really worked out all that well so far. So this is not giving me great hope that he lasted to the 6th round. And I know today news came out from like the beat writers or whoever, whatever that it is for college, basically saying that Trey Wisner is going to be the workhorse back this year. Take it with a grain of salt because they also said that who was it? Silas Bolden was going to be the wide receiver one or something like that last year. So take it with a grain of salt. But I mean, we haven't heard a lot of things about Baxter. He was a great recruit, a high end recruit. I saw a lot of things. I did not see a lot of things in year one that I loved, but I saw a lot of things in the recruiting profile and things like that that I fell in love with, and it just hasn't come to fruition yet. Do you think there's still a glimmer of hope there, or is Baxter going to fulfill his 6'10" destiny?
Yeah, I do think he belongs to be drafted in that later range there. Um, yeah, I'm the same way as you. Just haven't really loved what I've seen thus far from him. He doesn't look quite as explosive as he did coming into high school and coming off a significant injury. He's not going to look any more spry or explosive this year, you wouldn't think. So, um, unless something just really switches and he's able to lock into some better athleticism that we just haven't seen yet in college coming off an injury, I'm just not that into CJ Baxter at this point, which is too bad. Because at one point, highly thought of guy, you had to really pay up for him in supplemental drafts, etc. And I think we both really did like him, but you got to react to these things and drop these guys down the ranks. So I think that you can draft him here in the sixth, seventh range and take just a stab at that upside, but there's also plenty of downside with it. But yeah, that's true of a lot of the guys in this range.
Yeah, definitely. You start getting to the sixth round, seventh round. There's a you're looking for some upside. You're definitely not dealing with a lot of proven players. Although there's one player, maybe you can't say he's truly proven, but there's one player as we get into the eighth round that I'm pretty damn excited about. And I probably would have taken him much higher than he went. Hollywood is still in the chat. He says, "I need a Debbie Devotional T-shirt signed." And I'll tell you what, like I said, we have some big news coming up for the Debbie Devotional here pretty soon, and we might do some stuff like that once the big news happens, like some T-shirts, some merch, things like that. I could definitely see that happening in the near future. So while I can't give you anything just yet, stick around. And he also says, "What am I sipping on? I am drinking Woodford Reserve Double Oaked. That's kind of become my go-to recently, and it was actually on sale, so that was nice. They had buy two bottles, save $14, and so I did. And so,
Love it. We're
yes.
going out to the Bourbon Trail here this later this summer for a buddy's bachelor party. So
Ooh,
yeah, it should
I
be
have never been. I was supposed to go last year and didn't work out, so I'm jealous. But that sounds like a lot of fun. Speaking of a lot of fun, Bryce Baker in the seventh round. Um, honestly, that was the first name that I saw. I don't know if he's actually going to be fun. I guess the whole North Carolina drama is fun, but it is a higher end recruit going to a team that is actually, whether you love them or not, has actually put out some solid QBs in the NFL recently. So we can't hate on that, albeit a different regime, if you will. But when you're looking at these other QBs in this range, I guess really we can say it. We can just go over the entire QB list: Jade Maeva, Nico Jaron, KS, whatever his name is, Bryce Baker, Kamario Taylor, and John Mateer. We couldn't go a full Debbie devotional without somebody bringing up John Mateer here in 2025. So this is the round of the upside QB. But is there any QB that you truly love here?
I don't mind a shot at John Mateer in that range. Even Maeva, Nico. I mean, the just the player pool in general is just dropping off there. Like there are plenty of guys in that round where I'm like, yeah, I'm okay drafting those guys over like Draylon Miller or even the other quarterback, the freshman Jaron Kiwi Sega Polatele, I believe is the pronunciation there. But anyways, like going to Cal, he is on my do not draft board. He's somebody I'm just avoiding at all costs, unless it's really deep in a supplemental, and I'm not getting him there. Right, he's going pretty early as a fairly highly ranked guy, but he's not like a 5 star or anything. And he's going to Cal. I just don't know. I don't know if there's the upside there in the system, if he's going to win the job even. I don't want to wait around to find out either. So just not
Yeah.
terribly enamored with him and his tools. So, anyways, there's guys in that realm that I don't really love, but yeah, quarterbacks, I get a couple of those swings there. Bryce Baker, I actually just drafted him in a very depleted 3 QB C2C league. So it's like you really need quarterbacks in that league. I didn't really have any freshman quarterbacks, and he fell to me. So like I'm okay taking him in drafts, but this seems again like a range where I mean I can't hate it by any means because of the player pool around them. There are some guys that I mean I would probably wait a little bit further on him and Jaron, but I don't know. Like we're drafting Ruben Owens in the seventh, and at this point, it's like Ruben Owens, kind of a reclamation project or prospect project, whatever.
Yeah.
He is a lot of guys who maybe at one point they were Devy relevant. I'm hoping that Elijah Thomas, as a freshman at Oklahoma, freshman wide receiver, can break out. That's actually kind of a fun pick here in the later seventh. And John Mateer. I talked about it. I'm sure that you kind of like John Mateer as well, but I shouldn't make any assumptions. I'll let you tell the listeners if you like any of those picks, including John Mateer in the late seventh.
Yeah, Andy's the big John Mateer guy. Like he's all about him. I honestly, I'm, I don't believe I'm putting words in his mouth. I believe he has him as his QB2 in this draft class. So if I'm wrong, he can correct us when he gets back. But I'm pretty sure he has him that high. I don't necessarily love any of those picks. I don't necessarily hate any of those picks, except for maybe Ruben Owens. I don't really truly get that one. But getting into the funny thing is, we're sitting here 59 minutes and 30 seconds. I did not even know if we were going to be able to do a full hour on this, and yet I feel like we could go for another hour if we really wanted to. That's just the way we do things on the Devy Devotional. But the player, like, could possibly be the steal of the draft, and I guess I can't say it's a guaranteed smash steal of the draft, whatever. But if I had to choose one player that I said is just going way too late for at least my liking, it's Austin Simmons going at 8:03. Is he guaranteed anything? No, 100% not. Is he in a very good situation? Yes, and it's kind of goes full circle where we started out with Caden Lee. They brought in other players, and we everyone talks about the system and everything. Well, if the system's that easy, if everything's that easy, then Austin Simmons is going to be a stud, and he's going to be a well-known name by the end of this next year. And then everyone's going to say, "Give me Austin Simmons," and yet you got him here at 8:03. So honestly, like I said, might be my absolute favorite pick of the entire draft.
Yeah, that's nice. I like Austin Simmons this season. I think he's going to have a great year. He's underratedly mobile. Think there's a lot of talent there. There's just also a lot of unknown, but we like the system and we like some of the weapons. I drafted Caleb Cunningham, Ole Miss borderline 5-star receiver in this class, and then you'll actually see there in the what 10th 9-12. So almost in the 10th, I drafted Caden Lee, who we highlighted at the beginning of this podcast. So definitely some Ole Miss love here on the podcast tonight. And yeah, that's fun. We know how they turn out pretty talented and productive wide receivers there. So didn't mind taking a couple of dice rolls on those guys.
Absolutely. Obviously there's a lot of players that we can get into, and maybe we will. Maybe we'll touch on the rest of the draft on a future pod. But we're gonna go ahead and get out of here for now. Actually, it looks like they stopped after the 10th round, so I don't know if they're continuing on or if that's it. But we'll just leave it at Austin Simmons and Caden Lee as the last two players that we say, hey, we really like these picks in the later rounds. And like I said, Austin Simmons possibly the steal of the draft there. It's a lot of fun covering stuff like this, but just really figuring out, who should we be drafting, who should we not. Obviously, we don't want to just be negative, but at times we have to be to just say like, hey, it's just like we've been doing these rookie drafts. Aaron and I are in a rookie draft together as we speak, and I'm just looking at it, and I'm sitting there going, man, we're in the late second round now, and there's just so many players that I would not draft if you gave me another 2 rounds. And yet, they're going in the 210, 211, whatever. And that's not me picking on. I'm not saying actually 210 or 211. I'm not picking on anyone in particular. I'm just saying that's where some of these players are going. And if you give me 2 more rounds, they still wouldn't be drafted by me because I'd be drafting these other players. And I feel like we have to look at it the same way with our Devy drafts here. It's not that, you never say never with a player, but you just go, hey, I'm probably not going to end up with this player because I'm going to take these other players ahead of him, and go with the better strategized picks, that do hit more often or are more proven, things like that. That's what we're trying to get you to do. Hey, Aaron, we didn't even have our third guy, and we still went over an hour here, just doing what we do.
We are back to our old ways, but hopefully informative and actionable, at least analysis, because these are, actual people in the industry drafting where they would select these guys in a Devy mock. So definitely we have a lot of interesting content, not just mocks, but all sorts of different analysis coming up this off season. But hopefully a useful exercise for this podcast.
Absolutely. We will be back in your ears as soon as possible. And I think by next week, we should be able to give out our big news and talk about that kind of stuff. If not, it should be very soon, but I believe it could possibly be next week. We'll be able to make things official, and very exciting news. Very, everything on the up and up here at the Devi Devotional. Looking good. We appreciate you guys listening. We will hopefully have our good friend Andy Starr back on the next one. For Aaron and myself, we appreciate you, and we will see you next time.